You will need to.
I will need to. Yes. Sorry, we're all rushing about. I've just been talking to the Law Society, as I will be again talking about access to justice tomorrow morning. Well, it's around 8 o'clock tomorrow for a fringe meeting on the cuts to legal aid, and of course a large part of that concerns cuts to legal aid that affects children. And I'm going to start by saying it's a real pleasure. It's my first time on the front bench this year. It's a real pleasure to work with like Sharon. You expect, I suppose, all politicians, like sort of sort of Terry Como sort of way, to praise all other politicians, but the clue is to listen when they don't. You never slag off your colleagues, but occasionally you don't mention them. So if I do say that I am just very admiring the job that Sharon is doing in bringing a huge amount of energy and warmth to the job that she's doing, and we work very closely on, for example, the issue of children's centres, because it just happens in my constituency they've decided that the local Tory council are going to close 9 of the 15 children's centres. Well, you wouldn't you? What possible good would they be doing to anybody? And I do think that the backdrop to this, I'll say a little more about this in a moment, is cuts. It is because actually there are some things that the government is doing in the justice field that affect children which are positive things. And although I disagree with most of what is in the current legislation on legal aid, on access to justice, when you look at the sentencing part of the LASPO bill that's going through at the moment, the one that I'm taking through Parliament for the opposition.
So for the benefit of those of us.
Legal aid sentencing and punishment of offenders. But the fact that it says punishment of offenders is a clue to the fact that added into the bill for the benefit of some of the Daily Mail at the last minute was various soundbite bits of the removal of the 50% discount on sentencing, and insertion of various new offences, carrying knives, criminalising squatting, that sort of thing, which is all just playing to the gallery, the press gallery, that is. And but actually, if you look at what was in there originally in relation to youth sentencing, some of it we disagree with, a lot of it we don't. The fact that local authorities are going to have responsibility for the for any child remanded now is partly to make them think about alternatives to custody, so that fewer children are remanded in custody. And if the government are going to do things which are genuinely thoughtful in that area, then I'm quite happy to support them. But that's not what's happening generally. It's generally not happening because of the huge cuts in services that we're seeing this government put forward. We've got not a very good history in this country of being either child-centric or treating children well. I'm going to read you something that's about 100 years old now. This is from John Bull magazine, reporting abuse at the Akbar Nautical Training School, where boys were being gagged before being birched, that anyone who was ill was caned as a malingerer, that boys were drenched with cold water or made to stand up all night for trivial misdemeanours, what we would call torture today, but which was considered to be the appropriate treatment of children 100 years ago. You do sometimes wonder how much, we obviously think of the past a lot, but you do sometimes wonder whether our attitude to children in everyday life, better in the criminal justice system, has moved on at the pace that it should have done. Now, I'm actually quite proud of the record of the Labour government in terms of young offenders, which is my area of responsibility over the 13 years we were in government. And I'm going to quote you a couple of figures here. A 43% cut in first-time offenders in the last Parliament, from 107,000 to 61,000, and a cut in the number of offences from 301,000 to 198,000. That's a 35% drop, and a cut in the under 18 prison population from almost 3,000, 2,932, to less than 2,000 today. That's a drop of 30%. I don't think those figures, I use them a lot, but I don't think those figures are generally well known. The reason that we had that transformation, that is a transformation in terms of young people being locked up and young people committing offences, is because there was a 13-year progression which involved things like yachts, which involved things like the Youth Justice Board, which we hope and think might now be reprieved from the general cull on quangos, so that actually you had people who were interested in the issue, who were expert in the issue, who stayed in the same job for a long period of time, and who had a system that was very different from the system pre-97 in terms of the way that young people being sentenced for the courts happened. Now, and I actually think that the benefit of that, had we continued with that, would have been not just been to continue the fall in young people who were criminalised, but it would also have been a fall in the adult prison population, because if you look at the statistics, the people who get into the criminal justice system between, say, 12 and 14 or 14 and 16 are far, far more likely to go on and commit serious offences or have a pattern of criminal behaviour over the rest of their lives. And you see those curves, the drop-off curve that tends to happen. People drop out of criminality. The reason is that when people leave the influence of their parents and get into peer groups, particularly young male peer groups, then they tend to get into criminal behaviour and they're influenced in that way. When they get married or they get partners in their mid to late 20s, then they tend to fall out of that behaviour. It's not rocket science. So if you can keep young people out of criminality during that phase, then actually you can make a positive difference to their lives and a positive difference to everything the state does, including the amount it spends on criminal justice systems. But we're going to lose all that, I'm afraid. We're going to lose all that because the cuts that are happening, 20% cuts this year in youth offending teams, will mean that will translate into about a 60% cut in preventative services. So you can't cut the representation in court that far. You can't cut the assistance that young people get when they're actually in young offenders institution, secure children, and so forth. What you can cut is either rehabilitation when they come out, or the preventative work before they enter the criminal justice system in the first place. And that, of course, is what is being cut. And that's what's so extraordinarily short-sighted about the current government's policy. The fact that they think that you can make cuts of 23% across the board in the Ministry of Justice budget, which is one of the largest cuts, and the fact that they will impact dramatically on children and young people, means that we will see all those trends which are going in the right direction, going in the wrong direction within the lifetime of this Parliament. It won't happen tomorrow, it won't necessarily happen next year, but over a period of time we will see all those trends reversing. I'm sorry if I'm speaking about my own area of expertise, but I haven't had an opportunity to do that so far this week.
You have less than 1 minute.
You have to pick the fringes that you're offered, really. And but I hope that what I said is relevant to what we're talking about today, because if we can't get it right, and I started by using those sort of 100-year-old details. If we can't get it right for children and young people, there are still horrific levels of abuse. I was talking to Bernardo's yesterday, and the level of not child sex abuse, which I think we're quite familiar with as a cancerous society, but child sexual exploitation, organised gangs that are happening, is rising. And if we're not taking those issues seriously, taking our UN responsibility seriously, as we should be in many areas of the justice system here, and not saying it's all about Europe or it's all about international affairs and it's not something that we should be concentrating on, then we are going to end up with that broken society that David Cameron said we already have. I don't believe we have a broken society, but if we go on the way we are, in the cavalier fashion we are, and particularly the way we treat young people, that's where we will be in 5 or 10 years' time.